Good morning, everyone. This is Marc Hiraud, the Secretary General of EucoLight, and today we are going to have a webinar on EPR non-compliance through online marketplaces, the state of play. First of all, I would like to introduce you to some housekeeping rules. We are recording the session. The speakers have agreed to that. And after the webinar, we will email you the slides and a link to the recording of the webinar. One important element is that the Q&A session will be after we have heard all the speakers. And the place for writing your questions is in the Q&A box. The chat box is for administrative questions among the speakers. So you need to put your questions in the Q&A box. And now I would like to pass the floor to our chairman, Mr. Fabrizio D'Amico, who is the general manager of EcoLight, Italy, who is going to introduce the webinar.
Mark, good morning. Thank you very much for this. Let me express a very warm welcome to all of you, to the colleagues, the friends who this morning are joining us in a very impressive number, by the way. As EucoLight chairman, it's my pleasure, my honor to open this EucoLight webinar dedicated to compliance with extended producers' responsibility obligations and online sales. This event can take place, first of all, because we have you, the participants, with more than 290 registrations and more or less the same as participants, and you will see the real figure. The program we have set up for you raises a lot of interest, evidently. Amongst today's participants, there are representatives of industry and their associations, EPR organizations, representatives from member state authorities, there are more than 40 actually, and of European and international organizations, thanks to your vote. We also have e-commerce actors, notably marketplaces, thanks to them as well. We focus on the issue of online free riding. This is a topic of high concern for lamps, WEE, and many other products sold online. We are concerned. It is well documented by the OECD and European Commissions. The online marketplaces link producers, often based outside the Union, with consumers inside the Union. They facilitate the sales in EU member states of products from sellers that do not always comply with extended producers' responsibility obligations and other Union legislation. This can include lack of registrations of producers, absence of waste take-back options for consumers, or no fees paid for waste collections and recycling. This puts compliant market actors at a competitive disadvantage and undermines the circular economy, the project we are working on, we are all working on. EucoLight is active on this file. EucoLight has indeed previously organized 3 well-attended events on this topic and has provided input to various consultations, notably from the European Commission. For EucoLight, it is essential to draw attention to this major non-compliance issue. This is why we launched this webinar, which includes key information on solutions aimed at improving enforcement of EPR requirements for products sold online to customers in the European Union. You will hear about measures implemented in 6 member states, about the thoughts of the European Commission consultants as to potential measures at EU level. And also you will hear the point of view and the solutions as seen by marketplaces. Thank you to our speakers. Let me express my hope that you will get a fruitful information from this webinar and get an ideas on which you can reflect upon or solutions you can implement in your country or organizations. We hope all this will be useful to you all after this 2 hours and a half of participations to our webinar. Therefore, don't hesitate to engage in the debate and ask questions to the experts. Thank you very much indeed from my side personally, and warm welcome from here, from Milan. Regards. Ciao. Mark?
Thank you, dear Chairman. We have a full agenda today with three main sections. One on national approaches. We have lined up a number of countries who are going to give us the perspective and the measures in their member states. And then we have a section on the project of the European Commission and the views of online marketplaces. So without waiting, I would like to hand over to our first speaker this morning, who is Jean-Paul Auberger. Jean-Paul is at various marketing and sales positions in the industry, and he joined Ecosystem, a major compliance scheme in France in 2013. And Jean-Paul is now in charge of the implementation of the new provisions of the AGEC law concerning EE, with a special commitment in supporting marketplaces and their vendors to get compliant. So quite appropriate subject. Jean-Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark, and good morning, everybody. And thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, Fabrizio, for giving me the opportunity to update you on what we are doing in France to sustain the compliance of distance sellers with respect to WEEE regulation. In February 2020, a global law was voted in France, in the French Parliament, to promote sustainable development. For almost 2 years now, we start to implement some of the numerous new measures of the law. Today, I will present the new obligation from this law relating to the marketplaces and to the sellers, which is in force since January 22 the 1st. I will provide an overview of the different consequences for the concerned stakeholders, meaning marketplaces, sellers, and also PROs. Finally, I will share with you an intermediate return of experience after 2 months of implementation. So I suggest that we start with the new provision of the law, and I will just recall before we start that AGEC stands for Anti-Waste Law for a Circular Economy. The law was voted in February 2020 and contains 50 measures that include new obligations and requirements of transparencies, new prohibitions, new tools, and a few examples among others to illustrate the ambition of the law are single-use plastics. They will be completely banned latest 2040. New EPR are concerned. There will be 23 with 1 year, including a very, in 1 year, there will be a very ambitious one that is building construction materials, and that will be the largest one. And also from since the beginning of the years, we have the responsibilities of the marketplaces, which are now responsible of the POM of their sellers. If we go in greater depth concerning distance sellers, what are the consequences of this new obligation for the marketplaces? There is a first obligation upstreams. As 1st of January, no, it's the other slide, sorry. Thank you. As 1st of January 2022, marketplaces have the responsibility for the obligation of third-party vendors with regard to all the EPRs to which the latter are subject, meaning EEE, furniture, packaging, batteries, unless they can prove that the seller is already compliant. The second obligation is downstream. Distance selling vendors must propose customers before the sale is closed, the one-to-one take back of the used equipment at the place where the equipment is delivered, meaning home collection points, and this must be done without additional cost for the customer. Also, the seller can encourage the deposit of the used equipment in a municipal center or in a store. It needs to set up its own collection frameworks. This is a reverse logistic solution, a stamping label, pre-stamped label. And in the case the seller has no frameworks set up, then the marketplace needs to substitute and propose its own system. So needless to say that such a new provision have crucial consequences for marketplaces, sellers, and of course, PROs. For the marketplaces, there are 3 crucial steps that need to be followed to prepare compliance. The first one is to inform the sellers that they have these obligations which are in force. The second one is to check the compliance of sellers. And the third one, if the seller is not compliant and cannot or does not get compliant, then the marketplace needs to take over the responsibility and manage their compliance. First implication is information. It is crucial since the majority of the sellers are not aware of the obligation, or at least they do not know that there were some change in the French regulation in January. So the marketplace needs to inform sellers of the obligation to be compliant and also needs to request from them the evidence that they are compliant. They also need to inform them to display the contribution fee visibly aside the selling price of the equipment. And finally, they need to recall sellers that they must organize this one-to-one take-back solution on the delivery spot. The second step is concerning compliance checking. One of the tools that marketplaces have is to check that if the seller is compliant is to ask the seller its URC. The URC is the unique registration code, and it's a new tool from the EJEC law. It's a tool that certifies that the producer is properly registered with the different PROs. So each producer receives its URC, which is generated by the ADEME, which is the General Agency for the Environment, and is supplied by the take-back scheme once the registration is completely fulfilled. Once there is one URC per producer and one per EPR. Therefore, for one seller, there might be three URC, one for batteries, one for packaging, and one for EEE. And hence, the URC needs to be displayed in the seller general's conditions. Last step for the marketplaces is in the case the seller does not want to get compliant, and if the marketplace wants to pursue the business relationship with it, it's need to take in charge different action on its behalf, including reviewing its contract. Sorry, it's a slide number 10. Yeah, it's a little bit before, sorry. Reviewing its contract with a PRO, since it will act as a representative for the sellers, adjusting information system to make sure it will support thousands of additional lines of declaration, collecting additional information from the vendors, for instance, the EEE net waste to complete the declaration, and invoice sellers with a contribution paid in advance to the PRO by the marketplace. Now, let's examine the consequences for the sellers. Implication for the sellers. It's a little bit later. Thank you, Maya. Yeah. Regarding the sellers, if the marketplace takes over the responsibility for the account of the sellers, then the marketplace will declare put on the market, pay contribution, and organize the one-to-one take-back framework. The second point is that if the seller manages its own compliance directly with ecosystem, it has to appoint an authorized representative, sign a contract, and get his URC. It will manage his declaration and pay contribution to the PRO, and also set up its take-back system. The other option is that the seller manages its compliance via EuroLight, and EuroLight manages the contract signature for and possibly for batteries and packaging as well. Declaration will be handed over on the EuroLight platform, and the payments will be made directly to the PRO. And on the top of this registration, the one-to-one take-back solution will need to be set up, obviously. Implication now for the PRO. There are many consequences for us. PRO are very much impacted because we need to review. We started to review all our contracts or producers' contracts in order to allow marketplaces to represent their sellers. The second consequences concern our information systems that needs to absorb an unusual number of producers and declaration. We receive unusual batches of contract, particularly from the authorized representative, who send us a list of sellers to be registered in a very short period. In the coming months, these contracts will generate thousands of additional lines of declaration in our system, and this system will need to support them. Hence, we need to set up automatic controls of the input we receive, and we need also to adjust our information system accordingly. As far as fees are concerned, we are working on setting up an assisted simplified declaration mode for sellers with a very limited number of codes. Moreover, processing so many data imply setting up controls and reconsidering the way so many producers located in such distant countries should be audited. And finally, we are working downstream on the setting up a one-to-one take-back prepackaged turnkey solution for sellers that are not in a position to set their own solution because they are too far from France to organize it. So we are working on this prepaid solution with a pre-stamps label or parcel, and it will be an extra service that they will have to finance. So although we are still in the implementation of the process of this law, I can share with you a few thoughts on what we are currently experiencing. As you can understand, also this law came in force in January. We are still in the process of implementation, and it will take a few months, and public authorities know that and are fully aware that we need this lead time. However, at this stage, we can draw a few observations. The implementation of the EJEC law is a huge opportunity to enlarge the financing of EPR to actors, mainly extra EU, that previously were not contributing. New marketplaces, new vendors join ecosystem since the beginning of the years, and other PROs as well for packaging and battery, for example. However, implementation requires time for preparation for all the stakeholders, including public authorities. For PROs, attention points are information system and teams reinforcements to absorb this additional declaration. A 12 months lead time for a smooth start is recommended, and public authority are conscious that we need this implementation time. Such a measure also stresses the roles of emerging actors such as authorized representative and possibilities the risk associated with such companies. It also brings the question on how we control such amount of information and how we audit the producer located in so remote countries. The proper collection of the used equipment by distant seller resulting from the one-to-one take-back is also an intention point to ensure that they will be treated locally and aggregated to the achievement of the 65 objective. As you can see, we are facing a huge challenge, and our team are very much mobilized during the start of the years, and we learn as we go. Thank you for your time.
Dear Jean-Paul, many thanks for your presentation, quite timely, and it's very interesting to hear about the return of experience from the French law, even it has just been implemented at the beginning of the year. And now we would like to introduce the perspective of another member states that has adopted a legislation to try to solve the issue of online free riding, and this is Germany. And I would like to introduce you to Miss Anne Sachse. Anne is a lawyer who is working for the German Environmental Agency, and in her task, there is the prosecution of free riders in the sense of the WE directive for sellers that are not based in Germany. And Anne is really responsible for competent authority to prosecute those free riders. And in her division, there is the implementation of the German electric and electronic equipments of the German law. Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mark. We are all searching for measures, options to improve the compliance with European EPR obligations. And I would like to present to you a legal amendment to the German Electrical and Electronic Equipment Act, the ElectroG, which from our point of view could improve the problem of online free riders, the compulsory verification for electronic or online marketplaces and fulfillment service providers. I think I do not have to explain the problem in detail. Fabrizio explained it in his introduction, and I think you all know that producers from outside the European Union are selling more and more directly to end users in Europe. They have no establishment on the European soil. They use electronic marketplaces and fulfillment service providers for selling their products. If these producers are not compliant with the European EPR legislation, the enforcement by national authorities is almost impossible. The problem is not new, but became more acute in pandemic times. In 2018, the German Environment Agency launched a legal study to find solutions for this problem. And our contractors presented in autumn 2020 some solutions. The most promising idea seemed to us to be the compulsory verification for two new actors in the EPR legislation: operators of electronic marketplaces and fulfillment service providers are the important new players because they set the opportunity that producers from third countries can offer their products in Europe. Next slide, thank you. After having published the results of the legal study in autumn 2020, the German Ministry of Environment started the legislative procedure and introduced our suggestions as well. The legislative proposal has been notified by the European Commission. And in spring 2021, it was adopted by the German Parliament, the Bundestag, and later on in the Bundesrat as well. The amendment entered into force this year in January 2022. But the compulsory verification got a longer transition period and will enter into force next year in 2023. Thank you. How we have implemented the compulsory verification technically in Germany. The WE directive is implemented in German law by the German Electrical and Electronic Equipment Act. And in section 3, we have the definitions, and we included the definition of the operator of an electronic marketplace and the definition of the fulfillment service provider. Next slide, please. Thank you. In section 6, paragraph 2.3, 2 and 3, the compulsory verification is described for electronic marketplaces and fulfillment service providers technically as a prohibition, as a ban. Operators of electronic marketplaces may not enable the offering or making available of electrical or electronic equipment via the electronic marketplace from producers who are not or not properly registered. And fulfillment service providers may not provide warehousing, packaging, addressing, or dispatching in respect of electrical or electronic equipment from producers who are not or not properly registered. And of course, we have sanction. A law is only as good as its enforcement, and enforcement doesn't work without sanctions. When electronic marketplaces enable the offering of not registered producers they commit a regulatory offense. This can be pursued and may be punished by a fine up to 100,000 euro. Next slide. And how does the compulsory verification work technically? Our National Register of EEE and Batteries, the Foundation Elektroaltgeräteregister, EPR, offers an IT interface to the list of registered producers. This IT interface can also be used by electronic marketplaces and fulfillment service providers. This IT interface is technically easy to implement, and the data reconciliation takes place automatically. That will mean that the check of the registration of producers, the compulsory verification, takes place automatically. Yes. Now the next slide, please. Thank you. And as I have already said in the beginning, the compulsory verification has not entered into force yet in Germany. But since last year, since spring 2021, since the legislative procedure has started, there is an extremely sharp increase in requests for appointing an authorized representative. Mr. Goldberg, the head of the German Register, no, please stay at this slide, thank you, has provided me the last figures that you can see on this slide. In the chart, you can see the request for 2019, 2020, 2021, and for the first 2 months of 2022. In blue, the requests for registration of national producers, and in green, the request of producers without an establishment in Germany. So this is a request for appointing an authorized representative. And in gray, in the middle, you see the request of one single producer who wants to register different types of electronic device and brands. You can see at first glance that the request for an appointment of an authorized representative has increased since we started to establish the compulsory verification in law. For us, this is the success of the announcement of the compulsory verification for electronic marketplaces and fulfillment service providers. Next slide. And we see another pre-effect. One of the largest electronic marketplaces announced to its own clients that sellers of electrical devices have to be compliant with German EPR legislation. Offers of producers without evidence of EPR compliance will be suspended from January 2023 on. Next. But how will it go on, especially on European level? Because we are not interested in 27 different legislations. We are interested to find a uniform European solution. You may know that the Waste Framework Directive will be revised and therefore be opened in 2023. The Commission started the public consultation now, and the German Environment Agency calls in his statement for the definition of online marketplace and fulfillment service provider to be included in the Waste Framework Directive. And in addition, member states should be given the possibility to impose compulsory verification on these new players on the market. Next. In my slide that will be made available after the webinar, you can find the link to our legal study in English and also to the interface, IT interface, and the link to the announcement of one of the largest electronic marketplaces, and the link to the statement of the German Environment Agency within the public consultation of the Commission on the revision of the Waste Framework Directive. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you to you. And this was very interesting to see that the German law has already pre-effects on the request for appointing an authorized representative or single registration from producers. Now that we are talking about Germany, I would like to give the floor to an environmental NGO, Deutsche Umwelthilfe, in the person of Philipp Sommer.
Hey, everybody.
I wanted to introduce you, Philipp. Say who you are. But if you want, you can say who you are, okay?
I can do it. Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, happy to speak here today with you about this topic and about how we can protect our consumers and the environment, even when they buy on online marketplaces. My name is Philipp Sommer. I'm Deputy Head of the Circular Economy Department at Environmental Action Germany, Deutsche Umwelthilfe. And yeah, next slide, please. We are a consumer protection and environmental protection organization in Germany. Next, please. We work to a lot of different topics. We are, for instance, renowned for our lawsuits on clean air, or our campaign which succeeded in establishing a deposit return system for beverage containers in Germany, or our work for waste prevention. Next, please. We have been founded about 47 years ago and have about 160 employees. Yeah, next. And I want to give a bit of an overview about the scope of the problem today, about what member states already do about this and what they should do about it in our eyes. Yeah. So yeah, I think as you know, the scope of the problem is the problem is increasing really rapidly, especially due to Corona, since now more and more people buy online. If they buy online, they buy on online marketplaces often. Here, there's a large quantity of sellers selling products from outside of the EU and from these third country sellers to European consumers. And often, as you know, they are not the sellers, or the products are not compliant to European law. And this is especially a problem for electronic equipment. So since this is the biggest category by sales volume on marketplaces like Amazon. We already have a lot of different studies on this. So for instance, from the OECD showing that it's up to 1 million tons of illegally imported electronic equipment in the EU every year. We have recent data, which I think is not published yet, that it's up to 70% of the products here not registered properly. And we have several studies showing that often product safety is affected. So like REACH is violated, or there are unsafe toys for children, or lamps with too much mercury. The biggest problem here is, I think, that if something really bad happens, then there is no actor liable to consumers in the European Union. And this, of course, is a very big problem, because if you buy at normal stationary shops or at normal online shops, there always is a responsible actor. Next, please. The second big problem here is that these third country sellers don't pay the EPR fees. And by this, they jeopardize on the long run, the financing of our disposal structure and the environmentally sound recycling of packaging, batteries, electric appliances, and so on. And the third problem here is that it's not only the product safety and registration which is not fulfilled here, it's also that these third country sellers don't fulfill their obligation to inform consumers about take back and to take back old waste equipment. And for instance, if all these sellers, which is a lot, would be compliant to the law, of course, we could have much more nearby collection points to consumers. And of course, this would have a very positive effect on the, in Germany, very low collection rate of waste electronic equipment. This problem is even aggravated by this cost advantage, which we have here, that since these third country sellers don't pay EPR fees, they can offer their products cheaper, and then consumers are more eager to buy them. And of course, the problem gets bigger. What I also want to mention here is the point that if we don't manage to get compliance to these points I mentioned, like product safety and so on, we we can be sure that also future obligations for eco-design, right to repair, and so on can also be ignored by these third country sellers. So I think it's very important that we take action here. Yeah, next, please. Yeah, so Anne already explained the German model. It's that the marketplace has to check if the product offered on its marketplace is from a registered producer, and otherwise he cannot offer or enable the offering of this product. Next, please. I make it a bit shorter due to time reasons. So yeah, as Anne said, it's we definitely see a very, very positive effect here, but only regarding the registration. So regarding the registration, it's really, really effective, and we see a sharp increase of registrations of authorized representatives and so on at our electronics register. And this, of course, has another positive effect that there's more money in their budget, for instance, for consumer information campaigns and so on. The problem, next please, the problem is that it's just about the registration. And the other points like product safety, like distributor obligations for take back and information of consumers, they are not affected. And of course, if a marketplace has no registered office in Germany, they are easy to evade the law as well. Yeah, you can go on, thanks. So what to do about it? I think it's really obvious, and I'm really kind of astonished that we don't have it yet in the European Union. It should be clear that always when you buy something, doesn't matter if offline or online, always you should have a responsible actor for the products you buy. So if something happens, there's somebody that can guarantee for it. And of course, if this isn't the case for this new business model of online marketplaces and third country sellers, then we need to take a new action. It's the same as we did before for the distributors and importers. The distributor now is responsible for all the effects of this product when he imports these products from outside of the EU. And of course, this needs to be the same for products offered on online marketplaces. So there's a very easy solution to this problem. It's just that the online marketplace has to check that there is a responsible actor liable to consumers for the products offered on the marketplace. And if there isn't, then the marketplace itself has to be responsible, fully responsible for all the different European laws regarding product safety and so on. The second thing here is that, of course, the contact information of this responsible actor should be shown, and the EPR registration number. Yeah, we can go on. So I think you will know that this is really a big problem and it's increasing. So we definitely need to take action here. I think there's this very easy solution that, yeah, there always should be a responsible actors to consumers, for consumers. And the place for this would be the Digital Services Act. And this is not if this is not possible anymore, then of course we need to do it in all the relevant product safety, product sector legislation, like General Product Safety Regulation or EU Batteries Regulation, and of course the WEEE Directive. Then we are very happy that there are so many member states and national governments already taking actions on this. This is very good, and already we see the positive effects. But as I said, often they just tackle the problem partially. So in Germany, it's just the registration covered, but not information and take back or product safety or other product streams apart from electronic devices. And even in France, which I think is a much better approach than the German approach, it's still just the EPR responsibilities and not other things like product safety. Yeah, so I think if as long as the European Union doesn't tackle this problem on a for the EU level completely and with an ambitious regulation, then of course we need the national governments here taking action, and this is what should be done now very soon, and sooner or later. Better sooner as later. All right, yeah, that's it, and thank you. and happy for your questions later.
Thank you very much, Philip, for your presentation. Very clear, and your message equally clear, addressed to notably the EU. And at this point of time, I would like to go to another country, Spain. And here we would like to hear about the Spanish measures against free riding. And it's my pleasure to introduce a representative from the Spanish government, Ms. Raquel Gomez Rodriguez. Raquel is a civil engineer, and she started her career in petrochemicals and project engineer. And since 2009, she's part of the subdirectorate of our Ministry of Circular Economy. And currently, she's in the department that is dealing with the streams of WEEE, construction and demolition waste, and the ROS directive. Raquel, it's a pleasure to have you here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark, for this kind presentation, and many thanks to EucoLight for inviting me to participate today in this brief event. 3 years ago, I also had the opportunity to participate in this event to expose the measures being taken in Spain against free riding. Today, we have enforced those measures and new ones aim at reducing the phenomenon of free riding, not only among EE producers, but also for all waste flows under extended producer responsibility. Throughout my presentation, I would like to talk to you both about measures that we already have enforced in Spain and that we are within the scope of EEM batteries, and the new approach that we will adopt as soon as the new waste law transposing the modification of the Waste Framework Directive is published. In relation to what we already have enforced, I would like first to highlight the definition of producer in the European legislation. A producer is someone who, regardless the sales technique, manufactures, sells, or press product on the market in a specific country. And it's required that this producer is established in that country. Or this producer sells directly to end users from another EU country or third country. Therefore, when a producer sells directly to end user from outside a country, it is obligated to comply with the obligation that the regulation of that country imposed on all producers that are established within the country. In our case, in addition to the obligation arising from the WEEE directive, such as registration on the National Producer Register and regular declaration of quantities product placed on the market, the producers are also obligated to include the registration number of our National Producer Register on all their invoice. In the case of online sales, this number will be visible on their web page. Next one, please. The Spanish EE regulation also involves distributors in the control of free riders. According to our legislation, distributors cannot sell products from unregistered producers. They must request the registration number from the producer. In addition, any customer can request the registration number of this producer. This obligation also applies to sales by internet. Despite these measures, free riders were still active, especially in the case of imports. For this reason, last year, we introduced an amendment to our legislation to allow customs authorities to require in their inspection the registration of producer in the National Register Producer prior to importation. This control applies not only EE, but also batteries. Related to this measure, our next panelist will give us more detailed information. So far, all of these measures are already enforced, but we consider it necessary to broaden the legal basis against free riders. Therefore, within the new waste law, that we are currently working on, a definition of product producer has been included to take into account the new consumption pattern. Although it's not yet definitive because we are working in that law, it is foreseeable that this new law will soon be approved. Of course, this definition maintains the same criteria as the definition above: a person who manufactures, sells, or places product on the market, and make it clear that the selling technique is irrelevant. Like with this definition of producer includes a no presence means as legal means of the conclusion of sales contract. For example, postal mail, internet, or even telephone are mentioned in the definition. Next one, please. Linked to this new definition of product producer and in line with action being taken by other member states, the role of e-commerce platform, it is also regulated. Specifically, the Spanish proposal to define the role of marketplaces includes the subsidiary responsibility of this platform in the sale of products. In other words, in the event that a producer sells through an electronic platform and is not registered as a producer, it will be the electronic platform which assumes the role of the producer of the product and therefore all of its obligations. These platforms will be able to make a single entry in the register under which they will declare all the quantities of product for which they assume the status of producers. In other words, it's not necessary to declare on behalf of all producers who have not assumed the role of producer, but under the responsibility of the platform, all such products will be included. In addition to these legal measures, the sanctioning regime of this law is also modified. It is important to have arguments to be able to sanction those who decide not to comply with the rules that apply to them. Therefore, in this new law, infringement arising from extended producer responsibility are expressly made visible. For this purpose, new two infringements have been included that have to do with the marketing of products and their obligations. One of them is directly related to the sale of products without complying with extended producer responsibility obligation. The other penalizes those who do not assume their obligations to finance and organize activities under extended producer responsibility. This classification, the classification of not compliance as serious or very serious depends on the impact they have on human health or the environment. In addition to include these new infringements, the penalties for this infringement have also been modified. The penalties for serious and very serious cases are significantly increased. Very serious breaches being punishable by up to 3.5 million euros. This amount are intended to prevent defaults from being profitable for those who commit them. And that's what all from my side. And thank you very much for your attention.
Raquel, many thanks for this clear presentation and the interesting legislative options in Spain. And as you were alluding, it will be my pleasure to welcome now our colleague from its inspection service in Spain, who is Mr. Ángel Gerardo Meléndez Hernández. And Ángel Gerardo is a trade inspector at the Spanish Department of Foreign Trade and Technical Assistance of the Ministry of Industry, Trade, Tourism, and SOIVRE. This service of inspection is one of the market surveillance authorities which is based in the airport of Madrid Barajas. And here is a coordinator for borders controls under ROS and WE directives. So, Angel, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you, Mark, for your introduction, and thank you all for attending this webinar. Well, I would like to tell you briefly about the system that we are due to put in place in Spain for the application of the border control obligations derived from the WE directive. But firstly, I would like to briefly present the main aspects of the SOIBRE Service of Inspection, to which I belong. We are, as you have said, one of the market surveillance authorities that operate in the Spanish border. In other words, we carry out inspections of certain products before their release for free circulation in the European territory, in the EU territory. We are a multidisciplinary body of state officials, trade inspector with nearly 75 years of experience in import and export controls. And our main goal is to try to guarantee fluency of cross-border trade, as well as conformity of certain products that are under our control in terms of quality and safety. And for that, as I'm going to explain, we use a range of digital corporate tools based on risk analysis. We work closely together with the Spanish Customs Authority, although we are not the Customs Authority. In fact, we belong to the Secretary of State for Commerce. SOIBRE inspect and control a wide range of products, some industrial products like toys, personal protective equipment, footwear, textile, especially clothes for babies and children, but also a small electrical equipment for domestic use, and all of them to check compliance with safety regulations, and also some agricultural products to verify compliance with the EU marketing standards. Fresh fruits and vegetables, olive oil, fish, among others. It's important to say that we only intervene for those goods that are under our control. And these goods that are subject to import control by us cannot be cleared through customs without the corresponding certificate of conformity issued by us. And in that respect, as Raquel has said, in the near future, we're going to have under our control the whole range of the electrical and electronic equipment to check compliance both with ROS directive and with WE directives. And I'm going to focus on mainly on the WE directive thing. So we can go to the next slide, please. So how our controls can help dealing with free riders? Well, the legal framework is ROS and WE directive that were transposed to the national legislation in 2013 and 2014. And according to this regulation, SOIBRE is appointed. So prior to the importation of this electrical and electronic equipment, we're going to supervise and verify the correct fulfillment of ROS and WE directive requirements, including the registration obligations in the integrated industrial registry. That is the requirement of the EPR, of the EPR responsibilities, the EPR obligation, sorry. In that respect, right now, there is a new legal act that is due to enter into force in hopefully less than 2 months. And that comes to clarify how we're going to carry out this task. So basically, when this new national regulation enter into force, Customs Authority will not allow any import of electrical equipment without our corresponding certificate of conformity. When we started to think how we can put in practice this new task, 2 main challenges. Sorry, can we go back to the, yes. these two challenges arose. The main problem that came out was the volume of products under control. A certificate of conformity would be needed for more than 800 customs references, more than 800 tariff codes. And this, as Jean-Paul has said as well, from another point of view, this is a huge volume of custom references. And we may be talking also about more than 1 million references in customs declarations a year. And the second challenge is to keep a smooth flow of international trade. So we need to match this question with this second challenge, to keep the smooth flow, but also compliance with EU regulations. And for that, we're going to have a few tools, these new national regulations, a new custom single window app that is an IT interface, a new software interface that we call it EstaCice, in which we are going to implement a new risk analysis tool to help us with the decisions. And we want to strengthen as well the use of another software that we have in place. We call it DocuCice for upfront documentary verification, to give the companies the opportunity to check the verification of the documentary in upfront. And an automatic verification of the registry, of the industrial registry, is going to be also implemented, as we're going to see. For previous experience, we knew it's not feasible to introduce more administrative burden to put in place this control. So it was necessary to improve the current custom single window. And for that reason, we are developing this new software. So theoretically, economic operators are not going to do anything more than they do right now to deal with customs procedures. So how is actually going to work? Well, in a few words, when goods are coming from third countries, the importer or the economic operator, usually through a customs agency, has to lodge or fulfill a customs declaration. Can we go back to the next? Yeah, thank you. They have to fulfill a customs declaration or an entry summary declaration in the digital customs single window, as in the rest of the countries. If in our case, if the customs single window identify an EEE tariff code, is going to send or is going to share this information with our system, with EstaCice, which is going to systematically check whether the economic operator VAT number is in the registry or is not in the registry. And we want this to be so for all of the EEE references. So in theory, registry number is going to be checked for all of the E references or products that went into the EU market through Spanish customs. And if we go to the next slide, in a few words, if the VAT number of the economic operator or his authorized representative is in the registry, we would send an OK signal and customs procedures can continue. In this case, the system would also check if the product itself were also declared in the registry, as we are going to see in the next slide. If the producer is not in the registry, customs procedure cannot continue. So we can see all this in the next slide in the control decisions tree. This procedure is simplifying this in this decisions tree. If the importer is not in the registry, the software is going to issue a non-conformity certificate, giving the producer a period of time to sort this out. In this case, the shipment cannot be released for free circulation until this was solved and would stay under the supervision of the customs authority. If the importer is registered in the registry, The software checks if the produce is declared. And if it's not, and it's not the first time importing this product, it would check if the period of time for declaring it has expired. I think it's a period of 3 months. So in case of not being registered in the registry, as I said, a specific period of time is granted to allow producers to solve this situation. And I don't have more time, but I just want to point out that the okay in the decision tree doesn't always mean a release for free circulation. This is up to the customs authority. Or that doesn't mean that our work has finished, because after that, under the risk analysis tool, we can decide whether to check documentary or physically the product, even pick up samples to send them to our laboratories for analysis. And I just want to say, for finishing, that we hopefully we're going to start these controls in 2 months, and our plan is to do it very progressively, because for previous experience there are always difficulties with this new control. To avoid this, as far as possible, we are working around the clock testing the software, and we're informing also the main importing companies about all of this. So thank you very much. Please, you can take note of our email for further information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angel. I think it's very interesting to hear about the concrete measures that an authority like yourself is in a position to implement for the control. So that's very useful, and it might give ideas to other member states and perhaps to the Commission. And since we are continuing on exploring the approaches taken by various member states, it's our pleasure to welcome the representative of the Finnish authorities, Mrs. Tina Vermate. And let me introduce Tina for 1 second. Tina is working for the Center of Economic Development, Transport and the Environment in Finland. And she is a senior officer working in the National Producer Responsibility. And particularly in her responsibilities, we have the compliance monitoring of distant sellers throughout all extended producer responsibility fields. Tina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me. So I'm going to explain a little bit about the new Finnish waste law and the actions we're planning for compliance monitoring here in Finland. So first, a slide about the Finnish extended producer responsibility model. We have 6 waste streams in Finland, which include batteries and accumulators, packaging, end-of-life vehicles, tires, and paper products. There are multiple producer organizations for each waste stream, and they all have to be non-profit, and only producers can establish and be a member of a producer organization. And it's a pretty straightforward system, because the producer organization must handle all obligations on behalf of the producer. So collection, transport, reuse, recycling, and reporting to authorities. It all goes through the producer organizations. And we as authorities, we have the possibility to use any collecting payment fee, which is 1% of the turnover of the producer, minimum 500 euros up to 500,000 euros, in case a producer doesn't join a producer organization. And we have a completely centralized system. So ELY Center for Pirkanmaa region, where I work, we act as a national producer responsibility authority. We handle registering, monitoring, and collecting data from producers and producer organizations. We report statistics and quality reports, and we maintain the producer register. The Ministry of the Environment is responsible for drafting legislation and providing guidance to us, but we do cooperate a lot with the ministry also regarding drafting legislation. We have close cooperation with a lot of stakeholders, for example, the Finnish Environment Institute, Customs, and the Finnish Safety and Chemicals Agency. A few words about the changes in legislation. We are going through a National Waste Act revision. It started last year and it's still ongoing. And there are many changes to extended producer responsibility. It now pertains to distance sellers. Already at this moment, all producers were required to join a producer organization by the end of last year. Previously, they could also join directly to the register, but now they have to join a producer organization. Another change is that a producer organization for packaging industry has to take care of all materials. Previously, there were several producer organizations and they're now merging into one bigger one. We also have changes to reporting, in-house control plans, making information of achieved recycling targets public. There are also changes regarding fees, modulated fees, minimum reporting threshold, fees of small and medium-sized enterprises, and single-use plastics legislation will be added to our legislation during this year. There are still some changes that require defining policy guidelines, especially related to fees, and this work is still ongoing at this time. And we have plans to tackle challenges of distance selling that we're working on currently. We're taking several steps. We're producing different kind of material to communicate efficiently to distance sellers abroad, as well as in Finland, such as brochures and animations and newsletters. We also have a comprehensive website in English. We've started actively networking with other colleagues from other countries. We're gathering information to be able to reach distance sellers and to enable joint enforcement efforts, and also to share information with our colleagues from other countries. We're also gathering information on member states, authorities, and their EPR schemes and producer organizations to provide those to our Finnish distance sellers. We are also currently working on creating a web crawler to find free riders. This work is still in a development stage, but hopefully within a year we will have more experiences. We have high hopes for this project. Next year we are planning to start more systematically the compliance monitoring of free riders. And also, we're hoping that the European Commission could undertake collecting and maintaining and sharing of information that we need in compliance monitoring, such as contact information on member states, authorities, and information on member states' waste schemes and producer organizations, because this is the kind of information that we need to give to our Finnish distance sellers, so that they know how to take care of their responsibilities when they are selling to other countries. But I think we will possibly hear more about this in the coming presentations. All right, thank you. That was all from me.
Thank you very much, Tina. It is interesting to see that the Finnish law has been amended, but also that from an organization point of view, the Finnish government is equipping itself with this specific unit in which you're working in charge of EPR compliance. And here it's quite interesting to observe all the technical measures and the practicalities that you are implementing for EPR controls. Many thanks. And now we would like to turn to Italy this time, where it's my pleasure to invite Carlo Bardini. Carlo has a degree in economic history, and since 2097, he has been official in the Italian Competition Authority. And more specifically now, is the Deputy Director of the Energy Sector Division with the General Directorate for Competition. And Carlo is going to talk to us about the simplified compliance models and the competition neutrality, a very specific and legal subject. And we are looking forward to hear you, Carlo.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to warn that my presentation probably will be a bit different from the other ones. I will be looking at this question of possible free riding of sellers on OMPs from the point of view of a competition authority. This means that I'm not going to talk about the working of the systems that are put in place by the operators and by the government, but only especially mainly about the competition neutrality of these systems. And although the non-compliance with, I don't know, can you hear me? I don't see the, yes, thanks. And the non-compliance with the environment obligations is also a competitive problem, because the EPR system has an important, has important competitive effects, because it is well known, it allows the internalization of environmental costs, and the environmental costs and the way ways to cover them becomes instruments of possible competitive advantage. This means, this explains why many competition authorities, including the Italian one, dedicated many efforts to implement and to make this system to work properly. And this means that every producer must pay the exact costs of dealing with the waste that derive from its products. And of course, the solution in order to overcome the free riding problems are desirable. But what we have been looking at is only, in this case, if the solution entails restrictions to competition or not. And this is why I'm going to talk about a specific case, the case of the simplified compliance model, which has been proposed by probably the most important OMP, for sure in Italy, the most important OMP, which is Amazon. And well, the simplified model, in synthesis, it's implies that the Amazon will estimate the sellers' quantities put on the market, and then to communicate it to the PRO, and will choose the PRO in order to identify the contribution, and then the total contribution that each seller has to pay for in order to comply with the EPR obligations, and then the OMP will collect and pay the contribution to the PRO. Well, what is important here, what matters, has mattered for the competition authority, is that this program was included by the Italian Ministry of Ecological Transition into a program which involves not only the the OMP and the ministry itself, but also the two PRO which have been chosen by Amazon in order to put in place this model. Well, the Italian Competition Authority received a complaint about this model, this agreement, because from a competitor PRO, the complaint was about the possibility that the agreement would have had an exclusionary effect in both the markets which are interested by the agreement itself, which is the first one, the market for the OMPs, because there was the risk, according to the complainant, that the agreement would allow the users of the Amazon OMP to enjoy less onerous compliance conditions, and those attracting more vendors to the OMP of Amazon, and to the advantage, the other hypothesis of exclusionary effect was that on the market for the PROs, because by means of the agreements, the existing PROs would have had exclusive access to the customers of the Amazon OMP. And then there was also a complaint about the lack of transparency of the agreement, of the whole agreement. And as I was anticipating before, what the competition authorities is interested in is to see whether this agreement was somehow violating competition law. And well, in principle, the contract conditions between the OMP and the PROs are the outcome of negotiations between private individuals, so there is not necessarily room for intervention by the competition authority unless there are one of these two conditions, that is either the existence of a dominant position of one of the interest parties on the two markets, interested markets, and or if there is some form of state intervention that can discriminate against some operators who remain outside the agreement. And so please, next slide. So the first question we had to answer was, is there any dominant position of some of the operators involved in this in the agreement? Of course, there is a dominant position of Amazon in the OMP market in Italy. It was easy to see because there's a very well-known recent case brought by the Italian Competition Authority, closed November 2021, and in the case, the final decision, it is clearly stated that there is no doubt about the extremely significant market power of Amazon and of the existence of the position of super dominance of Amazon in the OMP market in Italy. And this means that the behavior of Amazon can be challenged as abusive behavior if there are the necessary condition. And so this is why we had to go through the exact working of the Amazon's model, and in let's say the general lines we present here in this I present here in this slides are that although the Amazon model intervenes in some of the steps of the compliance process, and of course by simplifying them in the way we have seen before, Our conclusion was that it does not charge smaller fees to the users of Amazon OMP compared to the ordinary, let's say, compliance process, because the fee charges to OMP vendors are determined for the same categories, valid for the generality of producers, and then they will be adjusted in case of deviation of the actual sales from the estimates made by Amazon. So in our conclusion was that the functioning of the simplified compliance model was not capable of bringing any reduction in the EPR burdens to OMP users, and so there's no reason to think that this model will exclude competitors of Amazon.
1 more minute, Carlo, 1 more minute. Thank you.
1 more minute, only 1 more minute. Well, I will go quickly through the rest of my presentation. Was that there's no dominant position instead between the PROs involved in the agreement, but there is, of course, the role of the ministry. The ministry has an important role in this program because above all, it undertakes to ensure for all purposes that the model, the adhesion to the model gives full compliance to the environmental obligations of the sellers, and as the role of the ministry is so important, it is also important that there's no advantage granted to existing PROs already included joining the agreement. But the agreement is very open, at least this is what we have seen by going through it. Every other OMP can join the agreement, and also other collective system, other PROs can join the agreement. So in the end, what the Italian Competition Authority did with this complaint that was raised by the competitor PRO was an intervention of competition advocacy, simply writing a letter which is public, can be found in the newsletter of the Competition Authority, in which we stated that we were substantially approving the intervention because it was aimed at solving the problem of free riding, but that we appreciated the opening of the agreement to the other OMPs, other PROs, and hoping that the choice of PROs by the OMP will always remain free and based on a competitive offers by the alternative PROs. Thank you very much.
Carlo, many thanks to enlighten us on the specific competition angle of this market dynamics. And I think it's quite interesting to understand your thoughts of your ministry about that. And now I would like to come back to the perspective of a member states, which is Austria. Our colleague, Mrs. Brigitte Reich, a lawyer with UFH, the main WIS scheme in Austria and a EucoLight member, has prepared for us a short presentation on EPR non-compliance through online marketplaces, the new regulation in Austria. Sadly, Brigitte is with us as participant today, but she cannot talk because she is ill, and she has asked me if I could deliver a short presentation. So that's what I'm going to do now. There is a new regulation, and that's a novelty aspect, very recent in Austria, with the revision of the Austrian Waste Management Act. It implements the Circular Economy Package of 2018, in particular the Waste Framework Directive and the Single-Use Plastic Directive in this new Austrian Waste Management Act of December 2021. There is the new provisions in a certain Article 12C for online marketplaces and fulfillment service providers. Its entry in force 1st of January 2022. 2023, and you can see a sort of parallelism with Germany in terms of time. And what is key that Brigitte wants to raise with us this morning is that there are administrative penalties for non-compliance with those regulations. Maybe we can give a little bit of details here. Operators of electronic marketplaces which enable third party to offer or provide products in Austria on the marketplace have to ensure in their contract with the producers of batteries, single-use plastics product, primary obligated parties of packaging, that these producers comply with the EPR requirements in Austria and participate in a collection and recovery system, take-back scheme. If this is not ensured, the operator of the electronic marketplace shall exclude the producer in question from its marketplace. And for fulfillment service providers are defined as a natural or legal person who offer at least two of the following services in Austria in the context of business activity: warehousing, addressing, packaging, shipping, and that for portable batteries, single-use plastic products, or packaging in which they have no ownership rights, with the exception of postal delivery and other freight transport services. And fulfillment service providers have to ensure that in the event of placing this product on the market in Austria, the producer must comply with EPR requirements in Austria and participate in a collective and recovery system. And this is not ensured, the fulfillment service provider shall refrain from providing this service. Okay, so you can see that there is a clear legal context for online marketplaces and fulfillment service providers with this new law in Austria. And I thank particularly Brigitte for the presentation. And now we are coming to a new section of our webinar this morning. We are going to talk about European measures to prevent non-compliant sales through online marketplaces. We have talked a lot about the national perspective as at present, and we would like to have a look at European level. And for this, the first speaker on this section of the webinar will be Star Molteno. And Star is from Eunomia, and she is a senior consultant who was joined in the summer 2019 Eunomia. And previously to that, Star has worked as a researcher at the Environmental Change Institute in Oxford and the Social Economic Research Team at the Forestry Commission in a role of freelance consultant. Since she joined Eunomia, she has worked on a number of projects for the European Commission on extended producer responsibility and waste-related topics. Star, we are looking forward about your presentation.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm going to talk to you today about our project with the Commission that's looking at measures to address the online free riding issue. Okay, I'm going to give you a brief overview of our project and what we see as the objectives of the Commission, and then run through the key measures that we are proposing to address the problem. So I know you've listened for a long time already this morning. I'd like to say this is the exciting bit where we can start to talk about really positive ways of moving forward. Okay, thank you, Maria. In the interests of time, I will skate over this slide. I just suffice to say that our involvement as consultants began in 2019 when my colleagues at Eunomia published on free riding in the context of online sales. And again in 2020, we covered the issue in our guidance for EPR schemes for the Commission. In 2020, December, there was the EucoLight webinar that many of you attended, and some months later, the Commission put this project out to tender. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So we are near the end of this work, which began last June. And throughout the process, we have tried to listen and engage with stakeholders. Many of you will be listening today, we will be having a final stakeholder workshop for this project on the 24th of March. I'll be giving you more details of that at the end. So as we understand it, the Commission is concerned to improve the effectiveness of EPR as a tool for achieving the wider policy aims of the circular economy, and really to ensure that the lessons are learned as EPR is extended to new product groups. Ultimately, there is a recognition that a greater alignment of EPR is needed at an EU level, and the outputs of this project will feed most directly into the revision of the Waste Framework Directive. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the key measures that we're putting forward to address this problem at an EU level. So we have grouped our measures, which did come out of the stakeholder consultation and talking to yourselves. We've grouped these measures into 3 clusters that correspond to a kind of low level, medium level and high level of ambition. And this slide, I'm covering the real minimum actions that we see are needed to make some change. And these are things that are easily implemented by the Commission and address some of the problem drivers. So firstly, aligning the legal definitions of producer, distributor, online marketplaces and fulfillment service providers is needed across waste legislation to reduce the complexity that is a current barrier. We see there's a potential for the Commission to set up a single web page that signposts producers to clear information on EPR for all products and across all member states. We know that this is provided by some of the sort of market-led organisations who seek to help producers in compliance, but we need one site that's actually independent and has all the links. And building on the format of the European WE Enforcement Network, EWEN and EWRN, encouraging the use of this kind of group for the other EPR products. And finally, to implement real change, the Commission will need to legislate for other actors to take action, and I'll cover this next. In my next slide, I'm going to just talk, give you a picture of how the system could work to ensure that only compliant producers are able to trade online. This is an idealized picture and would need to be adapted to different situations. For example, where PROs are functioning slightly differently, such as in Germany for WE, where they don't have actual PROs, but collection is managed in other ways. So in simple terms, a producer looking to sell on an online marketplace will be asked for its EPR ID number. And to obtain this, they will need to contract with a PRO and possibly an authorized representative in some cases. These organizations give the details to the producer register, and when the register is satisfied, then it issues the EPR ID number, which the producer will take back to the online marketplace. And the same process is required for producers using fulfillment service providers. This is important because not all the sellers using online will be using online marketplaces. Some may have their own website and rely on fulfillment service providers to distribute products. We see the value in this approach is that it places the burden of verification back onto the producer register rather than sitting with the marketplace. So for the marketplace, validating the EPR ID number should be straightforward. Just having an EPR ID number should prove compliance. It's not fail-safe. There are many loopholes we're aware of, but we see it as a step forward. And the big questions are, what happens if a producer doesn't give an EPR ID number? What are the consequences of this? And secondly, who would be overseeing the actions of the marketplaces and the fulfillment service providers? Who would be enforcing this? So in order to achieve this system, the Commission would need to legislate for various other actors to take action in their own operations. To save time, I'm going to focus mostly on the measures that affect PROs directly. At the stakeholder workshop, I can explain in much more detail the full range of measures listed here. But essentially, as I've just said, the producer register would issue an ID number. The marketplaces and fulfillment services providers would be requiring to ask for that ID number. The PROs on their half would smooth the system, the operation of the system for PROs who are currently restricted from registering producers directly, which is the case in some member states, that they should be allowed to be that intermediary. And it's also a potential role for PROs to invest resources in checking online traders, particularly those who are not using the marketplaces. to cover that loophole. Okay, moving on, Maria, thanks. So the above measures will produce a degree of change, but if the ambition is to achieve genuine change, there are further things the Commission will need to do. So the EPR information sites that I've just mentioned could have a feature that would allow competitors to report on suspected free riders, which happens currently mostly in indirect ways, and this would go directly to the relevant enforcement authority. So there is a very strong need to simplify the process for producers, and we recognize this. There are many ways to achieve this, but one more simple approach would be to harmonize the frequency of reporting across member states for and between the producer registers and that which the PROs require, so that we're not in a situation that a producer is having to report annually in one case and maybe quarterly or monthly in another case. And we have suggestions for how this could be done according to whether you're an SME or a large company. So the authorized representative process brings up strong differences of opinion, but we argue that much of the value of this process could be retained without the issues by allowing producers a single authorized representative across Europe, as long as there are minimum standards in place for companies offering this service. And finally, the translation of legal documents into key languages is something that we see as an important communication tool that isn't being used currently. So looking across the other stakeholders, for PROs, there would be a need to adapt to align reporting requirements with national bodies. We recognise this will have an impact on the management of finances, but the annual reporting may only be for SMEs and not large companies that make up around 80% of the regular income. And it's worth noting here that there's a real key policy choice for how to enforce that online marketplaces require from sellers this EPR ID number. As we've seen already, the French system is slightly different from the German system. In the French law, the marketplaces have the EPR obligations unless they prove that the seller is compliant. In Germany, the marketplaces must suspend sellers who are found to be non-compliant. We are concerned that where the marketplace effectively has the option to take on the EPR obligations for some producers, it may choose this route with potential negative implications for EPR in terms of the loss of data quality and a lower motivation for small producers to engage with EPR for the other sales that they may make not via that particular marketplace. Okay, moving on, Maria. We now come to some real big hitters. If the Commission is serious about moving EPR onto the next generation, there is a need for a more unified approach across member states. An EU central registration and reporting portal is not such a far-fetched idea, but would require considerable investment in IT at a member state level, as well as for the Commission. It may be needed that a single producer register is coordinated within the member states to feed into the EU level platform. But this would allow customs checks to be automated, as we've just heard in the case in Spain. There are movements towards this, but this could support EPR enforcement in quite a large way. And we've also explored the feasibility of introducing a new category of de minimis for the smallest traders. We've identified that there are micro enterprises within Europe who trade across member state boundaries without being compliant. We want to find a way to include even all producers within the EPR system, but we need to find a way that doesn't penalize them by size. So in this idea, these companies would be required to register, pay a small annual fee and give an annual report, but this would be sufficient for them to get the EPR ID number. The feasibility of this really depends on where that threshold is set and what quantities of materials are covered by such traders. Okay, next slide. These ambitious measures would have a strong impact on all parts of the EPR systems. Mostly, however, it would be the competent authority who would have to invest to support the implementation of an EU-wide approach. For example, ensuring that the IT system underpinning the producer register would allow automatic checks by customs authorities and OMPs if they needed it. So who has access to that data is quite a critical question. And a new category of micro producers ultimately should reduce the administrative burden on PROs because they're sidestepping the PROs. So another speaker earlier talked about smaller producers going through WeLogic. That's another possible route. Sorry, WeEurope, that already exists for a sort of EU-wide approach to the smallest producers.
A few more minutes, Star, please. Thank you.
I'm there, Mark, actually. So that's a very brief summary of some of the findings we've had in our work. I would like to say that we have a stakeholder workshop on the 24th of March in the morning. There's a complicated registering link there, but I believe we can circulate that to attendees as they're interested. It would be hopefully an opportunity to really discuss and talk through some of the issues with the measures that we're suggesting. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks a lot, Star. I think your recommendations are obviously of high interest because they propose really concrete measures at European level. And of course, will be interesting to see how far they are taken up by the Commission. And I would like to propose a presentation to just pave the way on the EU initiatives that are able to tackle the online free riding. So it's a short panorama of the legislative situation. We are going to cover legislation in the field of waste, in the field of e-commerce, and some other initiatives at EU level. First of all, I would like to remind you that the Waste Framework Directive is the natural home for the general requirements of the extended producer responsibility. And in 2018, already the revision of the Waste Framework Directive specifically referred to the case of distance sales for monitoring and enforcement of the EPR obligations to ensure that producers and producer organizations implement these obligations, and also therefore it implied that action can be taken to prevent free riding. Also, the same directive of 2018 foresaw guidelines to be published by the Commission to help member states to transpose those general requirements. At that time, there has been a study report by the same EucoLight, for which Star is a senior leader, to support the Commission preparation of these guidance for the member states. But the guidelines have not been published. Now, quite interestingly, the Commission has announced a revision of the Framework Directive. I must be clear, this revision has also to do with a lot of more ambition in the terms of the targets for collection and recycling. Yeah. So, but nonetheless, it is interesting to observe, and that is very appropriate for our case, that there is an ongoing study on EPR compliance and tackling free riding that EucoLight is involved with, that the Commission has assigned to EucoLight. So that's ongoing and almost finished. And in January 2022, there's been a call for evidence for an environmental impact of waste revision of this EU Framework Directive. So the stakeholder consultation has already started. And it is interesting that in the document of the Commission, they are referring to the improving the enforcement of EPR requirements, in particular for products sold online to customers in the EU as one of their policy options. So obviously, and that's a general message, not spelling out the various specific measures at this stage, Star talked about it, this revision should foresee measures to address the issue on online free riding. Now for the WE directive, we know that the Commission will launch a support study for the overall evaluation of the WE directive, starting soon actually. And we should remind us all that the WE directive establishes the EPR, the extended producer responsibility systems for WE, and it makes financially responsible for the collection and recycling those economic operators that place electronic products on the market. However, marketplaces and fulfillment service providers are not among those economic operators. So the revision that is going to come should lay down concrete measures to address free riding, taking into account, obviously, the revision of the Waste Framework Directive and other pieces of EU legislation. Now, very much debated topic at this very moment, which is the Digital Services Act. I will not go too much into detail, but I will try to spell out the key elements for our purpose today. First, the DSA updates the e-commerce directive, and it establishes provisions on providers of intermediary services, in this including online platforms, among which online marketplaces. And it notably defines the liability of those service providers. And it defines clear responsibilities and accountability for those providers of intermediary services, as the Digital Service Act called them. Now, our expectation, and here I'm talking from the EucoLight point of view, is to distinguish the liability of online marketplaces from that of other type of providers of intermediary services, and to foresee a number of compulsory ex-ante compliance check, like the German approach, for example. And failing so, they would bear, in our view, the liability as producers of the product, for which they facilitate the access to the consumer in the Union, meaning something like the French approach. And also, because we think it's very important, because this is the core of our discussion as well, the insertion of a clear reference to sustainability goals and environmental issues. That is what's the expectations. Now, when we observe the DSA as it stands at this very moment, well, there are some shortcomings, but there are also some positives. Now, first of all, you probably all know that there is no change to the basic principle of the prohibition for member states to impose on online intermediaries a general obligation to monitor information that they transmit or store. There is no specific liability regime for online marketplaces, although there is the liability regime for all those operators. No reference to sustainability. We are explaining that the Digital Service Act is an horizontal internal market measure, and that being horizontal and overarching, it is not to deal with specific type of legislations. And a shortcoming as well is that the current take-back mechanism does not address the reappearance of removed illegal content. Finally, there are some clauses on the traceability of traders, but it is not strong enough, and it is not linked to the liability regime in a way to say that if those tracing of traders obligations are not met, then the exemption for liability is there, that the link is not met there. Nonetheless, there are some positive aspects. First of all, it defines illegal content as defined by Union law, therefore, all what applies to environmental legislation. And it clearly sets the principle of what is illegal offline, for example, brick and mortar, should be illegal online. There is a clear reference to the definition of an economic operator. This could be, and we have suggested it, the purpose of a clear definition in this act, but it's nonetheless a positive aspect. And finally, there are some obligations on the traceability of traders, obligation to collect data, but not necessary to verify it, which is certainly a shortcoming. Now, what my message is here is that the acquis, the positive elements of this DSA, should be integrated into the other pieces of legislation, sectorial legislation, including EPR legislation, Waste Framework Directive, or WE Directive. And I would like to talk to you about a new initiative upcoming, very soon upcoming actually, which is the Sustainable Product Initiatives. And the context of this is the Circular Economy Action Plan for a cleaner and more competitive Europe that foresees an initiative on sustainable products. And I would like to remind you all that in 2018, I think, the EU, the Commission, has clearly stated the essential roles of producer responsibility organizations in the achievement of the circular economy, and that we should never forget. And this SPI, it is going to set sustainability principles and several mechanisms to regulate sustainability-related products with various instruments. And it will set requirements to ensure that all products placed on the EU market become increasingly sustainable and stand the test of circularity. By the way, there is a strong focus on electronic products and other products like construction materials, cement, notably. It will include a revision of the e-commerce directive, and it will foresee as an annex a so-called digital product passport.
Mark, 1 minute remaining, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Nigel. I will go fast. So what can we expect? Perhaps some clauses to tackle free riding. For example, perhaps the reference to a number of a sort of number or identification of the product. And the Commission proposal is expected at the end of this month. The Blue Guide, that's now connected to the EU product rules. What I want to say is that the new version of the Blue Guide includes fulfillment service providers as one of the operators that provide products on the market. And that's quite an interesting element. Next and last, perhaps we can skip this. Okay, and market surveillance, I would like to remind you all that in 2019, the EU has adopted the market surveillance regulation, and there is an article where market authorities can suspend the release of the product if there is no adequate documentation requested by the law, or there is a cause to believe that the product is not complying with the European law. That is where the role of national enforcement authorities is essential. And as conclusion, I would like to also open new avenues, and we'll just mention a cappella, is that possibly the EU wants to make the link with the customs as it is done in the Spanish legislation. And for us, it will be quite interesting to observe other pieces of EPR legislation, specific pieces, the batteries regulation, the packaging and packaging waste, and possibly as well the general product safety approach. And what is needed, obviously, I'm going to say the obvious, as Star has mentioned, is to have a coherent, unified approach at EU level. Thank you. And now, at this moment of the webinar, I would like to hand over to our animators of the panel discussion, Ms. Natalia Sierra, who is Head of Strategy and Institutional Affairs at Ambilamp in Spain. And I'm no, sorry, Caroline, I am overlooking. We have still a presentation, and that's very important. It's the views of marketplaces. Sorry, Caroline. I would like to stress that you are a senior consultant at DSS, and you lead the regulatory compliance for public policy practices. And since 2019, you have been also working closely with Amazon EPR team on developing EPR compliance solution for marketplaces. Caroline, it's a pleasure to have you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me, and good midday to all of you. It's nice to see many known faces, and thank you for the many presentations that preceded me and already gave us a very well-rounded overview of where we currently stand. Before I start, I wanted to have a quick word on the organization that I'm working for. You may still know us as Sophies, but we recently became part of DSS Plus. a consultancy firm specialized on sustainability and health and safety services. And I therefore invite you to check out our new website or reach out to myself if you want to know more. So I would like to start off my presentation by briefly reflecting on the context which we are currently facing and to give you some additional perspective. Yes, no, it's the next slide, Maria. Thank you. I think from what we've seen, the convenience of online sales has highlighted that consumers are increasingly choosing to buy online. This can not just be seen in the rapid growth of online sales, and particularly beyond the fulfillment model, but is also showcasing that based on their nature, it requires well thought through solutions with regards to EPR compliance. This is further being accelerated by the appearance of a multitude of new types of sellers. So we know that many SMEs trade cross-border and inside member states by leveraging on the single market. However, these exact SMEs often lack the administrative and financial capacity for required resources and knowledge that would actually allow them to easily identify, monitor, and comply with complex EPR registration, reporting, and payment requirements, which not only vary significantly across different jurisdictions, as we've seen from the many presentations before, but also at the EPR product category level, and add to this complexity that we are currently facing. Another point I want to highlight is that a majority of sellers, but also a breakdown of PRO members, only actually place small quantities on the market. We therefore need solutions that especially support SMEs in meeting their compliance solutions and need to be careful not to overburden them and thereby creating access barriers to the EU single market. And I want to briefly reflect on the case of France, where we have actually recently witnessed that there has been challenges relating to the capacity of EPR schemes and even reluctance of some of them to register small vendors. And this needs to be further considered as part of the broader point of making sure to allow all stakeholders to be part of the regulatory development discussion and to find the right solutions to the EPR complexities. So I think my point here is really that we need a system that is fit for purpose. As we all are very well aware, EPR legislations were developed before the online sales growth, and we've witnessed, besides this growth, that there is a multitude of new sellers and also a phenomenon of increasingly complex supply chains with producers oftentimes different than online sellers. And this is very important. I think Jean-Paul has already given us a rundown of the new obligations in France, but I would like to complement that picture by offering some insight into the current developments, which have been able to demonstrate difficulties with the feasibility of implementing those specific provisions in practice. And also sometimes not always being fully aware of the market actors' technical capabilities to gain access to required information. Here, for example, I just want to briefly dive into the fact that sellers might not only be distributing goods or might only be distributing goods and have therefore limited visibility over all the distinctive, unique identification numbers that are now needed as part of the new obligations in the French context. So this opens up questions whether the UINs need to be collected at an offer level or a seller level by the marketplaces. And this is something that has not been clearly communicated by the authorities in France to date. And I think this example shows us how crucial it is that during the formulation of those technical requirements that at the end of the day affect all marketplace providers and sellers there alike, that stakeholders need to be involved and need to be allowed to make their voices heard in the development of new requirements and the policy development overall to prevent misinterpretation. It is also to note, I think, that although marketplaces would prefer sellers to obtain their own compliance, the mechanism in France actually allows them to step in and to support sellers who are unable to individually secure the required compliance. This is not just to protect their own offer, but it's also to protect the general accessibility to different products on the French market, for example. And without such option, as we have seen in a German case, marketplaces are unable to support sellers who face barriers to obtaining compliance themselves. Next slide, please, Maria. And so, given the current work that we have done on also looking at the renewed EPR legislation across the board, I think it is time that we also take a moment to rethink the way that the current EPR compliance landscape looks like. For example, looking at the case of batteries here, we know the evaluation of the batteries directive has shown that the current directive did not succeed in ensuring the smooth functioning of the internal market and to avoid this distortion of competition within the EU. Examples here, for example, include the differences in classification of spent batteries across the different member states, or the criteria for granting exceptions to removability and labeling obligations, but also the obligations for collecting waste industrial batteries. And over the board, I think these examples showcase that the details outlined in the directive, as well as the different legal basis for the legal basis for the transposition, lead to diverging national measures on waste collection and waste recovery, which in turn can then result in an uneven playing field for batteries placed on the market, thereby additionally creating barriers for economic operators and producers. And here I think that, and I've seen that this has already been mentioned also by Mark and Star beforehand, which I very much welcome. For example, the new batteries proposal could offer an opportunity to remove some of these existing barriers in favor of a more detailed and fully harmonized regulatory framework. So thinking of setting a common regulation at EU level could be essential to ensure that manufacturers, importers, sellers on online marketplaces, but also SMEs, as well as recyclers, are subject to harmonized requirements that must be met either when placing a battery on the union market or supplying information to customers, or even when operating a recycling business. Next slide, please. And I know this is mainly some food for thought, and just to add a little bit of a perspective to the discussion that we're having today. And again, great to see some alignment with Star from Eunomia here, because whilst we know that this idea is not new, I think there's a benefit in maybe taking another look at innovative solutions to move towards a real single market. And one option that we have been looking at to make compliance easier for producers of batteries selling across the EU is to drastically reduce the administrative burden for compliance. And that could be done particularly by working and looking at how the creation of one single point of compliance at the EU level for the registration and reporting of batteries put on markets volumes could actually look like, and could also potentially be operationalized. So I won't go into all the details because I know we're short on time, but you can see here we had outlined a little bit of the elements that we think might be valuable to consider when looking at how this could actually be operationalized in a one-stop shop for batteries, for example. And now to my last slide, please. Perfect, thank you. I think generally over time, what has become apparent in our work is really that if we really care about the environment and we want to, and I've heard this now in a few of the presentations beforehand, if we really want to increase the financial means available for proper waste management and recycling, we need to think of ways to do this, and to really think of ways that we can create EPR policies that are driven by innovative solutions. Over the last 20 years, every time we've gone through a review process, either at the EU or national level, we witnessed actually actually an increase of complexity of requirements rather than a simplification. And I think that here the time has really come for us to rethink the way companies and particularly SMEs are requested to comply. Because at the end of the day, it's those actors that really need to be the ones that the compliance obligation is placed upon, and they need to be the ones operating and making sure that they can comply. So I would just like to say at this stage that time has really come for new policies. And I think these need to be based on greater cooperation to ensure there is a strong alignment between regulators and market actors. So thereby really truly ensuring the creation of a feasible mechanism. We need policies that are based on simplicity rather than on complexity to really allow a very well thought and effective mechanism in place that addresses all the different complexities that we are currently facing. And we need something that is based on pragmatism rather than on principles, really thinking, what are we actually really trying to achieve at the end of the day here? And finally, I would like to just highlight that we need to think of a long-term vision rather than contingency. The online sales environment is not going to go away. It will likely almost more increase over time. And so we need to think of solutions that are really fit for purpose. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Caroline, to hear your ideas and practical solution, and noted your suggestion for a single entry point. I think it's quite important that we have your vision to enlighten our debate today. And so many thanks to you. At this point of time, we're going to have the Q&A session. It will be shared by Ms. Natalia Sierra, who is a Strategy and Institutional Director at Ambilamp in Spain, jointly with Mr. Nigel Harvey, who is the CEO of EucoLight, the leading lighting risk scheme in the UK. Natalia, Nigel,
thank you.
I vanish, the floor is yours.
And you vanish. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to all the panelists for these fantastic presentations that I think it will open a little bit of discussion right now. I will ask all the panelists to switch on the video in order to see your faces. Okay, and thank you very much. If you could stay in mute till the moment you are addressed, that will be fantastic. So I think we're going to make a mix. Okay, because some of the questions that we have seen in the Q&A are well addressed to particular members of the panelists, but if anybody else would like to answer as well, of course, you're free to raise your hand, just click over there and we will pass you the mic. Okay, that would be fantastic. Just taking a look, let's start, okay, with one of the questions I have over here that it's been of two of the guests. They have the same questions, and I think it's quite a clarification that maybe it needed, and I will address it to two of our panelists. That will be Spain, Raquel, and France, Jean-Paul. Okay, so when we're talking that the marketplaces in the case will take the responsibilities, the financial and operative, whatever, on behalf of the producer, which is working through the platforms, are we talking about the figure of the authorized representative, or are we talking about something else? Thank you very much.
May I answer this question, Natalia? Okay.
Thank you, Raquel.
In the case of Spain, we are not talking about an authorized representative. We are talking about something else. We are planning to implement the subsidiary responsibility of the marketplaces in the place of the market of the product. So in the case of they sell a product with a registered producer under this selling, the marketplace have to declare this product and pay for this product. So they have to assume the responsibility of the management of this waste.
So we're talking in I would say a mixed figure. I would say something new.
Yes, it's not a proper producer, but it's more than authorized representative.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. Would you like to clarify on relation to the French legislation?
Yeah, well, actually, the marketplace will act little bit like an authorized representative in the sense that it will declare the put on the market of the vendor. So that's why we reviewed our contract. And otherwise, concerning authorized representative, as we said, when vendors are abroad, they need to mandate an authorized representative that will open the contract with them within the PRO, and that will represent them on the French ground. I don't know if I answered correctly to this question.
Yeah, I think it's quite clarified.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Nigel, would you like to proceed?
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Could I ask a follow-up question to you, Raquel, please? Because I love your system, but I've got one concern, and that is if the online marketplace is simply aggregating all the data of all the producers who are not registered, not registering the producers individually, but sending that information straight into the PRO, that means that for producers selling through the online marketplace, it is cheaper to register to comply because there is no national registration charge payable. It is easier because there's no administration involved. And what that does perhaps is that distorts the market, because selling through the online marketplace is more favorable than selling direct through normal channels. That for me gives considerable causes for concern, because it transfers market power, even more market power, to the online marketplace, and perhaps is distorting the situation. Almost feels like what Carlo was talking about, a state intervention discriminating against those not selling through online marketplaces. Perhaps you could comment on that, Raquel, and maybe Carlo afterwards as well, please.
Yes. Yeah, I see what is your point of view, but at this moment, with the current situation with European legislation, this would be the best solution from our side. The specific definition is not definitive, as I said before, because the new law is discussing in the coming days in the Parliament. But we are trying to implement different measures. This new definition, or this new obligation for marketplace, is one of them, and the new tool from the SOIBRE is another tool to fight against the free riding. But probably with this new law, or probably no, it's for sure, we need to implement the specific regulation for all of these waste of flows under the EPR regime. So maybe in this new regulation we could implement new rules for not distortionate the market in the way you mentioned before. So thank you for your advice.
And Carlo, do you have any comments on that? That if the national system makes it cheaper, easier, and less burdensome to declare compliance through an online marketplace rather than direct, do you think that amounts to some sort of state intervention that could be anti-competitive?
I would distinguish between the two different kinds of advantages. I mean, there's an advantage, a general advantage of selling through an online marketplace, which is, I don't know, you have less administrative expenses, probably, as you, just to say something, generally you don't have to pay, you know, the rent or the physical shops in, and it's easier. I mean, you have an advantage because you're using the online marketplace, and this advantage, I'm afraid, is difficult to eliminate. I mean, it's a part of, or at least it's not directly linked to the only linked to the EPR obligations. And on the other hand, there's a different kind of advantage, which means whether there is a lower fee for those sellers who producers and sellers who use the online marketplace instead of using the ordinary process for of compliance. And these, I mean, as far as we have been able to see, in our experience is a very little one and concern about one single example. What we understood is that this is not the case. I mean, it's possible to charge the same fee to sellers through online marketplaces as the fee which is paid outside the OMP. So I would concentrate on the second possible source of market power, and I think this can be controlled by local authorities and maybe even by the competition authority. And while I'm afraid there's not much to do, at least it's much more difficult to intervene in the general advantage that using an online marketplace gives to producers and sellers, and probably the administrative advantage is only of having to comply with the EPR regulations is only one of many advantages you have with respect to selling through the other through the physical infrastructures. But still, there is room for control, even by a competition authority in the second kind of a possible advantage.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Caroline, would you like to go?
Yes, thank you. I would just like to add maybe another perspective to Nigel's question, because I think here the point is also we shouldn't forget that this is one option that is available to sellers, but sellers have the option to comply by themselves. So I think here we need to be very careful about what we call advantages when we're speaking about selling through a marketplace. And Nigel, to your question also, I think here we have to balance a little bit. If are we looking at it from a cost perspective, what kind of perspective are we taking, or more from an administrative perspective, or anything related to the organizational part of things. So just to be able to distantiate a little bit our answers here as well. And I think I mean, we can go into details. We don't have much time here, sadly today, but of course there is a system that is made available to support sellers in their compliance requirements. And I think this has an additional value. And you can, and I think that, we are talking about an online world. So maybe the setup of these different structures is also very different, but it wouldn't be at the expense of retail sellers, for example. So there should be also a way to think, can we actually make it simply, or just make it simpler for everyone involved, also retail sellers, for example.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for your clarification. And
if I can add.
Yeah.
I just want.
Jean-Paul, go.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm what Caroline says. I fully agree with her, and the cost should not be an issue, because either the vendor, the seller, take in charge the cost or the burden of getting compliance, and it will cost him some time, some effort. Or it might be the marketplace that will handle this it on his behalf. But if the marketplaces do it, we assume that this cost will be paid by the vendor. There will be some specific fee that will be invoiced by the marketplace. So at the end of the day, it should not be a matter of money. It should be more a matter of organization. Does the vendor want to get directly to the take back scheme, or does it prefer to go through the marketplace? That's my view for France.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. We give the floor to Star and then to Philippe. Star, you can go.
Thank you, Natalia. One concern that we have is that sellers won't be only selling through one marketplace. So they may have their EPR costs covered and dealt with through that marketplace. They may sell also small quantities through their own website. And if they are relieved of the burden through selling through the marketplace, they will have less incentive to actually go through the process of registering with a PRO for their own quantities that they sell. So we think they will be disincentivized to take the full compliance route if they're allowed to go through the marketplaces system.
Okay, Philippe, please. Thank you, Stop.
Yeah, thanks. And another point I want to mention here is I totally understand that we should and we want to reduce the administrative burden for SMEs and of course for all companies. But I want to highlight that it's not the SME which is the weakest actor here in the chain, that the weakest actor is the consumer. So at the first point, we should make sure that consumers always have compliant products and there always is a liable actor. And then as a second step, we can try to reduce administrative burden for SMEs and for other companies.
Okay. Thank you very much to all of you. I would like to stress a little bit of this point we're tackling this precise moment, and I would like maybe Star or maybe Caroline to try to help me on this, specifically Star, because you're working for the Commission and this model is here on the table and we're talking about this. I understand the simplification model. I understand that some industries and some small and medium enterprises need a simplified model. This is something that have to be welcomed, not, I would say, in detriment of the rest of the companies in the market. And when I see this model and I see it in France, I could understand it, although the price fixing is something that could be subject of more debate. But I have my concerns when you have a competitive market where you have a number of periods in the market, okay? And is the marketplace the one who selects the period they work with, okay? And as Carlos say in this conversation today, he say, okay, we have the competition authorities, we have the Ministry of the Environment to control and to monitor on this. But if we're thinking in a solution that right from the very start, we need the competition authorities and the environment and the Ministry of the Environment just monitoring the solution, I think we should think about the effectiveness of this solution. I don't know, Star, Caroline, would you like to address this issue? Thank you.
I'll just make a small comment there. I think we've seen that every measure we put forward presents a whole range of new problems. And any new system for monitoring one actor then requires another actor to oversee that and enforce it. So it's not straightforward. I think there are ways. Carlo mentioned that you can prescribe that every few years the PROs that the marketplaces work with need to have an opportunity to bid competitively for that. There are ways of ensuring that kind of competitiveness stays there, but I fully agree that monitoring the monitoring is a problem that we haven't solved.
Thank you very much. Nigel, can you go?
Thank you. Yes, we had a question from Lars Vogt, and I think this is directed at you, Star. He's saying you mentioned a loophole for online sales not going via online marketplace. I understand this includes, for example, sellers' own websites, advertising on social media. So did you mean that there should be some sort of seller traceability or know your business customer obligation for online intermediaries?
Thank you. Let me split that into two for a moment. There's an important area when we look at social media as a route for online sales that is an ever-growing area. We think that it's very important that the definition of online marketplaces is broad enough to include social media sites that allow sales of these kind of goods, and that they would be subject to the same requirements to ask for, to register their producers and ask for this EPR number. Otherwise, we will see a lot of smaller producers sliding into new sales channels where they're not regulated. On the second issue of Know Your Business Protocol, we did put that forward as one measure. It was also talked about in the DSA. We have slightly tailored down what we've suggested, just simply to say that the marketplace should require not only the EPR ID number, but the trading name, so that it's very clear linkages between who the company that says it's putting the product on the market is and who's registered as. So that traceability element is there, yes.
Okay, thank you. Just we change a little bit of the subject, and this question is addressed to Ángel Gerardo Menéndez. Are you there? We have one from Dominique Wright that said, how is non-compliance with WEEE requirements taken into account in the RAPEX safety gate, the EU rapid alert system for dangerous non-food products, which takes into account the environmental risk? Ángel Gerardo, are you available to us to answer this one? Because it's very much related to one kind of instrument that the European Union has to control imports in the European Union.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer this question. I don't know. I'm not sure how these non-conformities are going to connect with the RAPEX, because, for example, in Spain, the contact point with RAPEX is the Ministry of Consumers, and there's a specific general direction for this question. We every time we identify a non-conformity, of course, we communicate this in terms. For example, we communicate this direction, any non-conformity in the product that are under our control, toys, personal protective equipment, and they send this non-conformity to the RAPEX. But in this particular case, I'm not sure. I think it's going to be more or less the same, but I'm not completely sure.
Okay, Star, maybe in your conclusions you could have take into consideration the rapid safety gate instrument, because as we have seen through your presentation, customs somehow will be also involved. So good to have this into consideration as well. Thank you, Ángel. Nigel?
Yes, thank you. We've got a question here from Maeve McHugh, and she says, it's interesting to see the approach from Spain, bringing online selling platforms into the scope of national legislation. But do we need a standard European approach, which is placing obligations on online marketplaces? And I guess that is what Caroline was requesting. That was what Star was proposing. That was what Anna Zacher, you have put into your proposals to make sure this is incorporated into an amended waste framework directive. So a question I would ask to everybody is, do we see any evidence yet of a European approach being taken? Because absent that, what we have now, individual member states taking action, is so important, because it's that action by France, Germany, Spain, and Italy and Finland that is actually making a difference in protecting compliant marketplaces. So, sorry, open question: do we see evidence that there will be some real action? Perhaps, Star, could you start with that?
Thanks, Nigel. I think it's important that there is action taken at an EU level really soon, because as you can see, every member state is developing their own approach to this. And, you know, I think there's lessons to be learned already from implementing the French AGEC law. You know, how feasible is this to be implemented, and how would it look if we required this across Europe, across all member states? You know, we really recognise that as well as improving enforcement, there is a need to simplify the process that a producer goes through. So, for example, if we replicated the French approach, a producer would be having to give not only the 3 unique ID numbers for France, but also those for the 27 other countries. And that doesn't achieve the aims of actually making a system that is simple and workable.
Caroline, would you like to have the floor?
Yes, just to complement what Star was saying, and I fully agree with her. I think we run the risk here that some member states take a lead, which of course is very well welcomed. And so I agree with Nigel on that. But we run the risk that every member state will again bring in their own little tweaks here and there, and we again increase the complexity that not only sellers, but all sellers and marketplaces have to face. And I think we need to make sure that the EU steps up here and finds a way that we can at least have a common language, going back to the discussion on definitions, because we cannot have a real EU single market if at any point in time, anything that is related to EPR starts becoming a challenge that needs to be faced yet and yet again in every single member state. And we have 27 of those. So I think this is just my point.
Thank you, Caroline. Now you go.
I would just say, thank you. I would just say on behalf of every compliant producer in the EU that we are grateful for every member state that has actually put in national legislation to date, because EucoLight first raised this in our first seminar 5 years ago. And still, for example, the DSA has no material proposals to address this. And so without those commission-based proposals in place, it's great that the individual sort of national authorities are taking action.
Okay, I think I have time just for one more question, and I would like you to share it with Star and Caroline. Okay, first of all, Star, it's fantastic, as Nigel said, to see that the way the Commission is going forward is the way that we proposed it some years ago, and it's a good sign. I would like to stress one thing in your study, that I do agree with you with this, to have this one point contact, okay, it would be a digital one, okay, in order to put all that information in the national registers. But I would like to stress the fact that not every single country has a national register. And this is something that maybe should be solved first in order to give that pan-European solution. So just take this into consideration. Somebody asked me here, because we have seen here two messages of pan-European solutions. One of them is the authorized representative at an European level. Star, if you could inform us on that. And Caroline, this one that really shocked me, because we have previous experience, and the European Commission and even the national states did not agree too much with that, which was the idea of the pan-European PROs. Okay, so first with the start with the authorized representative at European level, and then you, Caroline. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalia. I will address that question. I just want to follow what we were just saying about the need for pan-European solutions. I think it's worth emphasizing to this audience that the way that we can achieve that is by the member states supporting pan-European approaches. And if member states are individually fighting their own corner and protecting their own existing systems, that will hold the Commission back from putting forward really innovative solutions.
Absolutely.
And so coming to the idea of an authorized representative, this is in place for under the market surveillance regulation, that a producer can have a single authorized representative to represent their compliance and due diligence requirements for products across Europe. So there is a precedent for it. We understand that there are, for the PROs that we've spoken to, there's a big resistance because the authorized representative operates as this point of contact between themselves and a distant seller. And that can be a linguistic barrier, that can be an ability to reach that authorized representative. But what we've seen in the case of Germany, as we've suddenly had a massive influx of registrations using the authorized representative process, is that those authorized representatives often aren't even equipped to perform that function. Maybe they don't have the required knowledge of the EPR system. Maybe they don't even have the required linguistic capacity to provide the intermediary service. So it's not currently working in the way it should work. And we think that by putting some minimum requirements in place for what that authorized representative should be able to do and allow it at a European level, it could simplify the process. But it would require legislative changes on a number of levels, and we're aware of that.
Absolutely, absolutely, Star. Caroline, well, I don't know, Philip, sorry, before Caroline. Philip, do you have a comment on this?
Yeah, just that in Germany, in the electronics law, there is a formulation that the registry, German electronics registry, can make performance and quality obligations on the authorized representative to make sure that the data and quality of the application is correct.
Okay, thank you. Caroline, can you comment something about this proposal of the pan-European PROs?
Yeah, I think Star has already covered most of it, and I would second what she said, especially the point on EU member states really also supporting the Commission's agenda here.
Okay, thank you very much, Caroline. Nigel, I think we are in the final minutes. Would you like to make any conclusions or any other additional questions?
I think yes. If we're reaching the end, I would just say thank you to all our panelists and presenters. It's been enormously useful. I think one of the conclusions is that absolutely we do need to work towards a pan-European solution. But our experience at EucoLight is that that's taking a long time. And as I mentioned, 5 years ago, we started this debate and we are here now, and there are still no proposals on the table. So in the absence of those, we would encourage member states to carry on putting in their own mechanisms, albeit recognizing that they should be withdrawn when there is a pan-European solution, because without this, compliant producers based in the EU are suffering significantly. So thank you very much. Is that sufficient, Natalia?
I think it's perfect, Nigel, perfect. Well, so I think this is the end of the webinar of today. Thank you very much for your participation, and it's fantastic to see how much we have go forward on this precise issue. In any case, if you need cross-fertilization or contacts, just ask EucoLight, because we have specifically on customs of whatever, because we didn't raise the questions. And you use your EucoLight just to make this contact as much as you want. Okay, so Mark,
also cross-fertilization and networking.
Perfect.
Some practicalities. Every participant will receive the pack of slides of today, which includes the agenda, because I've seen that there was some discussion about the agenda. So it's clearly the agenda and speakers mentioned in this pack. And there will be also an access to the video of the webinar, if you want to watch it again, accessible on the EucoLight website. Thank you all. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.